And today we're here with discipline in sobriety. All right, guys, welcome to today's episode. We're going to be talking about discipline in sobriety. And I'm your host, David Sherwin with Sober Motivation. Welcome to the show, and anyone who's listening right now. I am praying for everybody who's struggling right now. And I came across this topic with discipline in sobriety because there's some things to consider with that, because as we all know, addiction is a real struggle. It's not a walk in the park. It's a deadly disease that if you stick with it long enough, if you drink enough alcohol and drink the way that some of us who are listening do, it'll kill us. It'll send us into a hospital, into an insane asylum, or jail, all of which are no good to us or no good for us. And some of us have already been through those moments in our lives. And you know, the worst outcome out of all of those, in my opinion, is death. But you could be permanently stuck in jail for the rest of your life. You could be permanently stuck in an insane asylum for the rest of your life, as there is such a thing known as alcohol psychosis. Just getting some water in, guys. And there's obviously hospitalization where, you know, your body can only take so much of a beating with alcohol or drugs for that matter. But I came across the idea for discipline in sobriety because it was something I was meditating on today, and I came to the conclusion with the meditation that it's not just about being disciplined, because we know we can be disciplined. We know we can do things on a constant daily basis and just constantly doing it, such as our addictions. We were fully dedicated to those when we were on the bad side of it. Some of us who are still on the bad side of it, just hear me out. But with dedication in sobriety and staying on the path that we want to be on, you have to also consider the idea of being kind and gentle to yourself and not just beating yourself up over past failures. Because when I was thinking about this idea, I was thinking about when I relapsed and how much I was beating myself up over what I felt like was lack of discipline. And that could be true. I could very well have had a lack of discipline, obviously, if I spun out or I railroaded myself back into where I was at. But I was reflecting on the idea of thinking about how I always thought that I was never good enough for some reason, because I'd hit a bump in a road somewhere and I'd consider that me just being a failure, me not being good enough at life. But I never took the time to really consider and look back at what positive things that I was able to do while I was sober. Like, for instance, I did start this website, I started a podcast, started a YouTube, and I did that, but I didn't consider the successes. Like, I never enjoyed the successes. I never took gratitude in what success I had in just not drinking for that day. And I was ungrateful, I was selfish, and I ultimately just led myself back into astray with alcoholism, and where I was hiding it from people to where I couldn't do a podcast. I couldn't get up and go do this if my life depended on it, because I just had lost the vision of where I just came from, which was killing me at that point, and it came back around to try to kill me again. And for those of you who now are listening, who are staying dedicated on this path, or even for those of you who aren't, consider this thought, this food for thought, that you listening into this now means something. Like, that's a success in my mind, because you can give yourself props for tuning in and listening to a podcast where somebody is speaking up about sobriety and trying to hopefully give you hope, and hopefully you take that hope and bring yourself to the light side. Kind of talking about the force there again. I I was talking about it with somebody who I had recently met in the program that I'm working, and he really didn't have a way to work the 12-step program until I introduced him to the idea of using, for instance, the Force from Star Wars. I know it's written fiction. I know the movie's fictional. I know it's not real, but the whole idea of the Force is that it lives through all of us with positive, but there is a negative side to it. For instance, with how Darth Vader fell to the seductive thought of the dark side and went into his murderous ways because what he thought the dark side provided, which I also thought that a lot with drinking, was that there was a promise that there was going to be a better outcome on the other side of it. And there never was. There never was a good outcome on the other side of drinking. It always just ended with, I got crappy sleep, and then I got a crappy day ahead of me because I was hungover and I felt like shit, and I couldn't talk to anyone because I was afraid that they were going to smell me, and I couldn't focus. I couldn't work as effectively as I know I can when my brain is on point. So that's why I highly recommend to anybody who is struggling with maybe this idea of dedication to be gentle to yourself. Consider meditation, consider writing poetry, things that are positive that you can do with your own hands, or going to meetings, going to self-help meetings and getting your help there. And not look at it as if you're in a spot where, oh, I didn't do good enough. Like, look at it as, hey, I went to this meeting today. Hey, that says a lot about me to actually get up and go do something like that, or to get up and do, say, a virtual meeting. If that's all, I know that's mostly all we have at this point with our whole COVID-19 thing going on. I feel like it's one of those things where it's always on the media, but I also am aware that it's affecting people in deadly ways. But consider that idea, please. Consider the idea of waking up, being grateful to yourself that you woke up, you actually made the effort to get out of bed, or at least put on your headphones or whatever you have to listen into this podcast, and to start your day and to not just railroad it again. And if you are, like, I'm praying for you, but just consider that idea that you're at least listening at this point. You've made an effort to come to this point to listen to whatever I'm having to say, and it's appreciated. But then consider, like, the other things that you can do for yourself for the day. For instance, your projects, a podcast, drop in a sponsorship right here. And we're back. Dropping a sponsorship after that, and consider that it's a great project. I love podcasting. For me, it's like a personal journal because I like writing, but I also don't at the same time. And in a way, I feel as though putting out a podcast lets me go back to a time where I was first coming out of my struggle with addiction, and to be able to listen to it and think like, oh man, that's what was going through this guy's head. This is what was going on when he was by himself, where, I was always trying to attach myself to other people's ideas. And it was hard for me to stick to my own. Although I would say that most good thoughts originate from somewhere else. So there's not really any shame in that, as long as what you're doing has good intentions. And yeah, so that's where I'm at right now, and just being grateful for where I'm at today. In this moment, in this present time, being able to breathe and to realize that there are people that care about me, and I know that there's people that care about you. They may be upset with you depending on what you've done, but they still care, and that's the whole thing. And maybe you're alone, but if there are people who knew you, I'm sure they would tell you they do care, because like that's how humans are. We're a community-based sort of creature. Like, we don't do well in isolation. We do well in groups. And I found that out today. I do well with a group of people versus me just being on my own thinking I have it all answered all these problems or whatever else I might figure it out. But today I got a phone call after I was kind of upset about something that went on personally. And this person who is a little bit older than me, I would say, but he dropped some good advice on me and to kind of reflect on not how I can change the other person, but like how I'm wrong for dealing with it the way that I was potentially going to deal with it. And that made a big difference for me today. And if that guy's listening right now, like, seriously, thank you. Like, that's where I stand corrected in the idea of thinking that I can deal with this sobriety on my own and to do it by myself. Like, I can't, I don't see that happening. And that's another reason why, like, I like the whole idea of the podcast, and I think other people should do it, is because you can keep growing it and growing it and growing it. And you don't really have to sell anything to anyone. I can sell the idea of you guys listening to ads, but it's mostly to keep this thing afloat, like keep the ship afloat as it's going forward. But like my goal isn't really to like totally sell you on stuff. It's mostly to be able to speak and listen and not have this back end thought where ultimately, oh, hey, you know what? I'm going to sell these guys something that I need to sell them. Like, I know I get this sober snapback on and it looks great. I love it. And I've gotten comments about other people liking it. And I passed on the information on where to get it on sobermotivation.com. But the reason why I wanted to tell him is because the hat actually helps me out a lot when I'm struggling, or say if I'm just on the go for some reason and I put the hat on, I wear it because I love it. I know I made it, but it's also like for me, like a reminder, like, hey, I get to be sober today. Like, hey, yeah, I am sober. Like, so what? Like, what are you going to do about it? Like nobody cares. Nobody's really thinking about it to that point. Like nobody is thinking about you much more than you're thinking about yourself. Everyone's in that same position. Like even with me talking right now, I'm sure like there's plenty of people who are thinking, oh, hey, like what am I thinking? I want to talk about something, and it's fair game. It's all fair game to speak your mind and get it out there, get the energy out there, like wave your hands around, spread your message, get it outside of yourself so you're not in your own head, potentially on your way to something just more destructive than just saying whatever it is that's on your mind. So that's where I'm at today with discipline and sobriety. Just be kind and gentle to yourself. Take care of yourself. Meditate. Don't beat yourself up over things that you think you failed in the past over. Like, just consider a ship sailed, and then look at the positive sides of things, like that you can even look at it in that perspective versus carrying on the negative weight, this extra heavy weight that you honestly don't need to carry on anymore. Like you just need to breathe and be more kind and loving to yourself. So then that way you can be more kind and loving to others. So there you have it. That was today's episode of the Sober Motivation Podcast. Hope you guys are all doing well on this Sunday night in quarantine for many of us. And I know there's a few people listening overseas that are probably in the same situation. Shout out to all you guys. Shout out to all the states that are listening. I know California is listening. I know I got about 50 other states coming through that are listening. Hold on. I'll get them up. I'll give them all a shout out. We've got the United States listening, Australia, South Africa, Pakistan, Austria, Guatemala, and Germany tuning in. So shout out to you guys. Shout out to everybody in the U.S. We got California, Virginia, Missouri, Idaho, Florida, Michigan, Minnesota, New York, Ohio, Colorado, Illinois, Kentucky, Maryland, Texas, North Carolina, Arizona, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Washington, Pennsylvania, Iowa, New Mexico, New Hampshire, Kansas, Connecticut, Hawaii, Oregon, Alaska, Georgia, Arkansas. It's quite a bit. That's quite a bit of listenership, and I appreciate it. I love it. I love all of you guys. Anyways, for those of you trying to follow me anywhere, follow me on Facebook at Sober Motivation. You can find me on Instagram at Sober Motivator, Twitter as Sober Motivator. TikTok even, we got Sober Motivator. And then you can find me throughout all the different podcast platforms under Sober Motivation. Anyways, hope you guys all enjoyed this episode. I was your host, David Sherwin, and I hope you guys all have a wonderful week. I love you